steaming inside.
Hello, happy Friday everyone. It is the final day of commsHERO. Hope everyone's having a great week so far, but there's still loads more to come and some great content on the way, so do not hold back. I've just realised I have released my inner Britney today with these headphones, so no judgment, no passing here. I expect some comments and some gifs abusing me about it, but I'll take it. So after what's been a really great week, and funnily enough, catching up with Rebecca at the CIPR Pride Awards only early this week in Leeds, it's great now to welcome Rebecca onto the virtual stage to talk all things data-driven comms at commsHERO. So just a bit of background about Rebecca. So Rebecca Benn currently heads up the external comms and strategy at Defence Digital, the digital delivery arm of the Ministry of Defence. No pressure, Rebecca. Data and communications are not usually two topics that go hand in hand. However, since the pandemic, the public's interest in data and how it's used has really peaked. So Rebecca's going to be talking about her research into communicating data to the public and some interesting ways that data has even made it onto the front pages. So she's going to give us some hints, tips, and how you can use data within your own campaigns and evaluation. So before I hand over, don't forget to keep the conversation going in the chat, on socials as well, using the hashtag commsHERO, because there's prizes to be won, and put your questions in the Q&A for Rebecca at the end. So I'll hand over to Rebecca now. Best of luck, and I'll see you later.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on a Friday. I hope your week has been going well. Thanks, Elliot, for that lovely introduction. I'm just feeling a little bit like past. But as Elliot said, my name's Rebecca Benn. So my presentation is around data-driven communications, a secret weapon to success, which is a great pun, seeing I work for the MOD. So I start off with one of my favourite quotes. It's not from somebody kind of funny or anything like that. It's from my son, who was very confused when he told his friends where his mom worked and nobody believed him. And I was like, oh, I don't know why. And then he failed to mention that it wasn't the Ministry of Defence, he said, but the Ministry of Magic, which is not where I work at all. So as I said, my name's Rebecca Benn. I'd like to say that I'm a digital storyteller. After 13 years of working in health, last year I made the move to the mod, and now, as it's been said many times, I've moved to external relations, which is the delivery arm of the Ministry of Defence. I know earlier in the week we had Leslie on. Her side of the MOD is far more glamorous than mine. There's no Tom Cruise jumping out of buildings on my side, unfortunately. What I would say is one of the things that I'm passionate about is professional development, which is kind of one of the reasons why I find myself doing these kind of presentations. So when ASIF asked me to don the cape and do my bit for commsHERO, I did literally jump at the chance. And can I just say what an amazing week it's been. I haven't been able to catch most of the live, but I'm looking forward to having a bit of a catch up on the weekend. I think the bit that's really not surprised me, but it's been really lovely to see the kind of diverse range of speakers. My son, who got to the pack before I did and had my gummies, a little bit jealous about that, was having trouble finding me on the grid of presenters, which is not something that he usually has, because we had a range of other Black women and women of colour on the grid, so it was harder for him to spot me, which I think really kind of shows how representation really, really matters. And as I said before, public speaking is not really my forte. But as I said to my son last night when he told me flat out that he wasn't going to be presenting at his assembly, which is next week on the Great Fire of London, give it your best shot. What's the worst that can happen? We'll see. Anyway, here's an overview of the things that I want to cover in my session. Now, I will mention this a lot, is that I am obsessed with data and I am a self-confessed data geek. I have a love of numbers and problem solving, which, like I've said a lot, most people don't really think it goes hand in hand, but for me they do. And then I think to start, I'll do a bit of a story time. Now, the first time I did this story, I did it in the third person. I don't really know why. So this time I've kind of moved it, kind of relaxed it down a bit, and just kind of talked about kind of me and how I got into this. So I grew up in Birmingham. I have a little bit of a Birmingham accent, which I'm very, very proud of. And I love talking, and some people would argue I love talking a bit too much. Um, and I think if I could pinpoint the time when I realised that this was a vocation for me, something that had to do with talking a lot, it would be the Small Heath Asda. And if anybody is on the call from Birmingham, I think you know the area, Small Heath, and at the time this was like one of the biggest supermarkets that opened. And there was a greeter on the door that was friendly and welcomed people, and all the people there were really happy and friendly. And I came away with a My Little Pony cup, Care Bear mat, a shell suit, and yeah, that was my dream. I wanted to work at Asda, but we'll come back to that. What I also had growing up was a great love of maths. I did really well at GCSE at maths, decided I wanted to do it as A level. But what I found was a lack of support for somebody that wanted to do maths along with humanities. So I was doing music, history, and English. And the A level teacher that I had at the time, like, said to me that, you know, me doing maths was a complete and utter waste of time because there's just no way that I'd need it or use it if I was going to do something in humanities. And that kind of really started getting me down. If I go and ask for support or help, I just get, well, if you were doing physics, this would come easier to you. And there's these frustrated sighs and everything just kind of made me realise that maybe I was wrong and pursuing something more in maths and on that side of things just wasn't really for me. So obviously, as a child growing up in the 90s, the pull of PR really came down to watching the original PR gurus, which are Patsy and Edwina. For people that don't remember, absolutely fabulous. You should go back and have a little look at it. It's a comedy. It's funny. It's not really depicting how PR life is really and how it is to work in comms, but it definitely was enough to spike my interest. And as people say, I was drawn to the dark side. It's a picture of me with my bestie, Darth Vader, and have decided to pursue a career in communications. And fresh out of uni, being in Leeds, I got my first PR role, which was in the press office at Asda. See, dreams do come true. And there I was able to use data that we were able to collect on basket spends and regional breakdowns and sales price from products. So it was really, really interesting to see how data was used to really create stories. And I think one of my favourite stories was around Christmas. I kind of went on the database and kind of did a great piece on, you know, we will sell X amount of foil enough to wrap around Trafford Centre 4 times, and just like kind of really silly stats like that, which piqued the interest of the BBC, who then came down to one of our stores and did a kind of whole piece, which was just for me really amazing and one of the first, you know, data stories that will always stick with me. So obviously, when you move on from retail, moved into health and then defence, what I love about all these areas of work is that with numbers and with communications as well. And I think that this is really important, especially in the job that I'm in now. Because when you look at the statistics, the percentage of women in STEM for technology and maths are at 19%, and for computer studies, it's up 38%. And you know, this shortfall isn't really surprising to me when I think about my experiences, and I can imagine the other experiences of women that may want to go into there. Now, what I would say is that I'm extremely privileged at the role that I have now, working as head of external communications in the defence sector, because I'm able to champion some of the great female leaders we have in this space. So, some of my greatest hits. Now, I was looking through my kind of backlog of different stories, and this is kind of from when I worked in the press office. And are some of my fondest memories is when I dealt with Half Data for English, By using these data that was collected, we were able to work with charities and other partners to shine a light on health inequalities and economic divides and help to set the news agenda and bring these topics to light. So we've got the rising Victorian diseases that enabled a conversation around the rise of poverty. And we were able to see the regional breakdown, highlighting areas in England that needed support. With Dog Bites, we were able to collaborate with the Dogs Trust to raise awareness of dog safety and care. We worked with Young Minds charities, and we were able to use the data to highlight the pressures on young girls, which were leading to hospital admissions. For me, these stories demonstrate that if you have the right data, the stories will jump out on the page. Working in the public sector, the work that we do in this sector isn't really around selling products and services. It's more around driving changes in policy and highlighting inequalities and bringing important topics into the news agenda. Using data like this is also helpful in highlighting trends and helps us to create strong links with our stakeholders and have campaigns that have those powerful stories behind them. So, as I said to you all, my role now is very different. I've worked in the MOD for over a year, and I still feel relatively new in the role. Communicating defence digital's capabilities, it's a real challenge. I think one of the things that I love to champion is our senior leadership team, and the fact that it is 40% of the team are women in the digital function. As a whole, the digital function spreads across the whole of defence, and we're just doing some really amazing things now. Now, notwithstanding the level of securities that my team and I have to adhere to, the range of topics we cover in digital space literally covers space. Cyber, cloud capabilities, to name a few, and of course, data. Now, in defence, data is a powerful tool, and it drives decision making at the highest levels. In my role, I'm able to show how data is a powerful tool, only second to our people, and communicate how it's used across the forces as a collaboration tool. What excites me the most is seeing how data and the advancements in digital capabilities are making significant advancements in the way that we defend our nation. So I did say I'd talk about how to be a data storyteller. Now, before I start this slide, I have to say that I am a massive Helen Reynolds fan, and I haven't seen her presentation yesterday on TikTok, but it is on my list and it should be on yours as well. So I think, we all should be striving to be data storytellers, and I'd love to say that all you need to do is arm yourself with a superpower, but really it's a lot simpler than that. The art of telling a story is pretty simple, and I know as comms professionals we know this. There needs to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. Where data can help is providing you with a credible hook or analysing the data. The story simply writes itself. One of the things that frustrate me is the fact that data is so readily available, but as communicators, we sometimes see numbers as a blocker, and getting a comms person to open an Excel sheet feels like a real hard sell. So if it's hard for us to embrace data, it's an even harder sell to get the public to see data as sexy, don't you think? Anyway, I decided to do some research on this as I wanted to understand if there's any way we could make big data sexy to the masses. I won't bore you with the whole thesis, but believe me, it's a really riveting read. There's some kind of bits that I found out which I thought I'd love to share with you guys. So the first thing that I found out was that it's hard, especially when working with big data. Having lots of data to hand is great, but if you have an idea of what you can do with it and how it can resonate with your stakeholders, and would anybody really be interested in it? This is when working with stakeholders is key. And as I showed in some of the greatest hits storylines I've had, being able to create a focus group is the best way of testing your ideas to make sure they're not off the mark before you invest too much into the campaign. What surprised me the most was that the public's perception of data, they really don't care about data use until they do. Doing the research during the pandemic really highlighted how that change in perception can be fast sometimes. The other thing I found out is that experiences matter, and bringing that human aspect is where storytelling comes to the fore. Data can only tell half a story. Looking at this Daily Mail headline is a prime example of this. Putting aside the fact that the data used was incorrect, what it doesn't show is the pressure the NHS was and still was under, and how initiatives like looking abroad for nurses were in fact helping to keep wards going and saving money and adding to the rich cultural diversity that is our NHS. Which brings me to my last point. Sensationalism will always overshadow the truth. There's a flip side to this story, though. We were able to work with the workforce team to create a data set which showed the range of nationalities that worked within the NHS. And this campaign resonated with staff and was able to help us get more data on our workforce nationalities at the time. Another thing that I realised in my research, and something that I think is really important to us, is to have in mind what you want to communicate. What tools do you have at your disposal? I'm a massive fan of being able to help people use their own data to tell their story. Although I don't use Spotify, as I am an Apple person through and through, I'm slightly jealous of the review of the year. From a data perspective, it's a brilliant example of getting people to talk about your brand. It did make me laugh that my very cool brother, that prides himself on having a very eclectic mix of music, ended up having Baby Shark as one of his top tunes. You need to have in mind how you can use your data to turn it into a good story. Like I said in my role, was and still is using data to change policy and perceptions. Headlines like these help to bring the topic to the news agenda, but in turn lead to stories around how to lose weight, to live healthy lifestyles, but also shows that there needs to be more support out there for people wanting to make these changes. So you have your data, the case studies that bring it to light, the right partnerships in place. All that's left is to make sure you know what your so what is, what that important hook that joins the data and the story together. This is the best way to describe it. The best way to describe that to me is really, how would you explain the story if you were talking to a group of friends about it? You have no control. This is kind of one of my favourite stories, actually. But you've got no control of how your story will play out. But you can be as prepared as you need to be by having an understanding of the barriers that you might encounter. Brand history always has a tendency to follow a story. Just because it's worked once doesn't mean that it will and have the same success when you do it again. Also, if there's been negatives around how your data has been used in the past, it will make it harder for you to land your story. The power of social media can either work to your advantage, but it's important that you need to be prepared either way. The well-researched story with the right partnerships can turn into an entirely different story, which brings me to my next point. Sensational stories will always trump the soup. This is why a simple campaign around the unfair pricing of generic drugs prescribing versus branded, which was a really strong clinical campaign, turned into the rise, excuse the pun, of prescribing Viagra once the patent had been lifted, which ran online and in the national place. My last point on collaboration, sometimes working in partnerships, your brand doesn't need to take the lead and it might not be the best move. Being in a position to celebrate others might just be the right mix that you need to really drive that campaign forward. So language plays a massive part in making your story meaningful. I find that in the world of data, I find that in the world I'm looking at pseudonymization and it's challenging me. I find that in the world of data, we use really big words like pseudonymization, which I've been looking at going, don't get it wrong. Only leads people to be scared about data use and presentations. I found that people are willing to give their data over if they think that it's going to help them or society in general. Charities like Genomics England has been able to collect health data at source that has aided further research into cancer treatments and much, much more, whereas some members of the public will happily hand over data in exchange for free meals or even the hope of a cash prize. Purpose is really important. Is your comms around? Is your comms trying to drive the conversation, getting someone to take action, or just highlighting the work that you're doing? Although this is a really sensationalized headline, it helps us to have a conversation around the lack of talking therapies and the public's perception on antidepressant pills. Regional data is great to use. It enables you to tailor your messaging and focus on the variation that you can find across the UK. The Monzo Banking as a brand really uses their data effectively to do this in a really comical way, and is kind of one of my favourite companies that are using data in a way that I think is really interesting. But as you can see, regional data needs to be relevant. I think that the ad in the summer around use of Magnum and clearly showed that the company in question didn't do their homework, because obviously this isn't the kind of garden that you'd want to have your Magnum in. Being able to give people the tools to tell their own story is definitely a great investment. Not only does it help with brand recall, it normalizes data use and breaks the stigma around data and numbers just being for academics. We use the Baby Name Explorer app to look for name trends when trying to make sure our son didn't end up with a popular name. However, you can have all the data in the world, but it only needs one celebrity to mess that plan up. So these are some of the takeaways that I'll leave you with. Make it easy for your key stakeholders to get on board and share your message. Pick your battles when it comes to using and defending social media. Support your fans and give them the tools they need to share your stories, and keep it simple, short, memorable when telling a story. And I can't have a presentation without mentioning COVID. Doing my research over the pandemic was a complete movable feast when it came to the perceptions around data and data use, and this formed a massive part of my findings. Never did I think that the nation on a whole would be talking about our numbers and using data to map out how the virus was spreading in their location. From the shielded patient list that enabled councils to provide much needed resources to members of the public that were advised to stay at home, to daily reminders of hospital rates and vaccine numbers. I do think that there has been a significant that has led to a significant effect on how data is viewed, and helped people make more of a call when it comes to how their data is used. And I hope this hope this continues in the future. I think that as our role as communicators, it's really to ensure that we break down the barriers of data use so that the public can fully understand the pitfalls and the benefits. Well, that's my presentation. Thank you for all listening. I've just put there some of my details, and I've got there links to Defence Digital if you want to check out what we're doing there as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. Get your emojis on the screen for Rebecca. Drop messages in the chat. That was brilliant and really insightful. I think data in general is fascinating when it comes to comms. I think it's an interesting topic because we use it so much, but also the challenge of how we use it. So some clarity there. I did notice we did have a question in the chat from Emma from North Devon Homes. So Emma says, we don't have much in-house data available. Are there any public sources you'd recommend looking at using that are reputable, to quote?
It depends on what you're looking for. There are lots of companies that will kind of trying to think what I've used in the past. Leave that one with me. I'll come back to you on that one. But I think it is really important to make sure that the Statistica, that's a good one that I've used. Some of them do come at costs, but just make sure that it's reputable. It's really important to make sure that you're not just kind of Googling stats and just putting them up there. There's always going to be some supportive ones. I'd say as well, using government data's a massive shout out to NHS Digital. They have a very good range of health data, which is really helpful in terms of looking at different trends. I've obviously not been there for a year, but I'm sure they still have the like kind of prescribing data, the health. What's it called? There's one which kind of covers all the health things across England, and it looks at kind of alcohol use and prescribing and everything like that. Some really good and accessible data databases there. So definitely something that you should check out.
Real. And just a final comment from me, really, because obviously we speak to a lot of people on comms marketing campaigns, and everyone says that their data is rubbish. So how do we sort of overcome that? Is it a case of looking at data differently, repurposing how we gather data, or equally, do we just have too much data thrown at us as comms people?
I think sometimes the data that's thrown at us isn't the best. I have to admit, sometimes people are like, I've got this. But I think it's around thinking the story that you've got. Like I said in my presentation, if you think about the story that you've got, and then find the data that backs that up. Or sometimes it's just as simple as going out there, using something like Microsoft Felt Forms, getting out there, finding the perception, getting that data. And it works twofold because I think sometimes you can do that to understand where the gaps are in knowledge, and kind of use that as a basis to start that story.
Brilliant. And I love the references to Spotify and Monzo. I think they do it really well, and they've cracked comms and marketing when it comes to how they use the data to make it more targeted, more personalised. So Alison also agrees. She says that Piccadilly Gardens ad still kills her every
I
time she
know.
sees it, which is just brilliant. That's also the flip side of data gone wrong. So
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Rebecca. Emojis in the chat for Rebecca, everyone. It was a great session on data. So in 5 minutes' time, we are going to see Fit with Frank. So get ready to stretch, ready for afternoon sessions, and we'll see you after Fit with Frank.
See you, everyone. Bye.